Okay, it's 1 o'clock. I'd like to call this meeting to order. The proceedings of this meeting will be recorded and made available on the internet. We'll move on to item 1.2 of our agenda, which is roll call. And I will ask our clerk, Jessie Clark, to please call the roll.
Thank you. Mayor Lamstead, are you present?
I am present.
Deputy Mayor Armstrong?
Present.
Councillor Franzen?
Present.
Councillor Braybrook?
Present.
Councillor Cadigan?
Present.
For staff, we have Donna Taggart, CIO Treasurer.
Present.
Evan Grieger, Director of Public Works.
Present.
Barbara Waldron, Director of Building and Planning, CBO.
Present.
Adele Arbor, Planner.
Present.
Amber Novak, Legislative Coordinator, Executive Assistant to the CIO.
Present.
Rachel Stark, Economic Development Marketing Coordinator.
Present.
And Jessie Clark, Director of Corporate Services Clerk, is present.
Okay, thank you very much, Jessie Clark. We will move on to item 1.3 of our agenda, which is land acknowledgement and moment of reflection. We respectfully acknowledge that Trent Lakes and Peterborough County are located on the Treaty 20 Mississauga territory and in the traditional territory of the Mississauga and Chippewa nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaty First Nation, which include Alderville, Beausoleil, Curve Lake, Georgina Island, Hiawatha, Rama, and Scugog Island First Nation. Trent Lakes respectfully acknowledges that the Williams Treaty First Nations are the stewards and caretakers of these lands and waters in perpetuity, and that they continue to maintain this responsibility to ensure their health and integrity for generations to come. We will now take a moment to reflect on these principles and our duties and responsibilities as members of council. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. We will move on to item 2 of our agenda, which is disclosure of pecuniary interest. If anybody on council has a pecuniary interest on an item on the agenda, please disclose it now or anytime during the meeting prior to speaking on the item you have an interest in. Seeing no hands, we can move on to item 3 of our agenda, which is the approval of the agenda as circulated. The Deputy Mayor Armstrong for a mover and Councillor Cadigan for a seconder. Any conversation? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. Okay, we can move on to item 4 of our agenda, which is the adoption of minutes. We have the minutes from our February 6th regular council meeting. See Councillor Cadigan for a mover and Councillor Franzen for a seconder. That is to adopt those minutes. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. Okay, we can move on to item 5 of our agenda, which is committees and boards. Item 5.1 is the Environmental Advisory Committee. 5.2 is the Library Board Committee meeting, and item 5.3 is the Committee of Adjustment. We can do all of those in one motion, or we can speak to them individually. Go ahead, Councillor Franzen.
Motion to receive all reports.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? See Deputy Mayor Armstrong for a seconder. Any other conversation? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. We can move on to item 5.4 of our agenda, which is liaison reports for council boards and committees. Does anyone have anything to report? I'm seeing none. We can move on now. I would entertain a motion to suspend our regular council meeting and go into our statutory public meeting pursuant to the Planning Act. I would need a motion for same. Deputy Mayor Armstrong for a mover. Councillor Cadigan for a seconder. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion is carried. We are now in item 6 of our agenda, our statutory public meeting pursuant to the Planning Act. And Adele Hubbard, you have the floor.
Thank you. And through you, Mayor Lamstead, this is a public meeting under Section 34 of the Planning Act to consider an amendment to the municipality's comprehensive zoning bylaw B 2014-070. A notice of public meeting for today's applications containing the prescribed information was circulated to all landowners within a 120-meter radius of the subject lands at least 20 days prior to this meeting, and a sign was posted on the subject land, all in accordance with the Planning Act. The notice was also mailed to all prescribed agencies, public bodies, and persons in accordance with the regulations. Anyone wanting to be notified of any decision from today's public meeting must either inform myself or the clerk, and the notice of passing will be mailed to them, setting out the method and manner in which appeals may be made to the Ontario Land Tribunal. If a person does not send a written comment prior to the passing of the bylaw or make an oral submission at a public meeting, that person may not be entitled to appeal the decision.
Thank you, Dale.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have 3 public meetings this afternoon. The first one is a public meeting for file number 23-22 to consider a zoning bylaw amendment submitted by property owners Jeff and Carolyn Cran for the property municipally known as 1999 Crystal Lake Road. This zoning bylaw amendment application is to rezone the property from shoreline residential to shoreline residential with an exception to permit the construction of a pre-engineered steel building with a ground floor area of approximately 2,400 square feet and a height of 25 feet. The building is intended to be used for storage and contain a 2-piece washroom. In order to construct the proposed storage building, the applicant requires relief from the zoning bylaw in regard to the maximum height, where the maximum height permitted is 4.9 meters or 16 feet, and the applicant is proposing a height of 7.62 meters or 25 feet. The property has a shoreline frontage of approximately 91 meters or 300 feet and a lot area of 0.44 hectares or 1.1 acres. There is a planning report attached to today's agenda, generally in support of the zoning bylaw amendment, identifying 2 options for council's consideration. The planning report identifies that the application is generally consistent with provincial policy statement, the growth plan, and meets the intent of the official plan. In the planning report, Chris Jones identifies that the proposed storage building, in his opinion, represents a storage building suited to a rural zone based on the regulations of the zoning bylaw. He further indicates that the application has a large lot, the applicant has a large lot, and appears to have a need for storage based on the equipment storage located outside in the yard. I also wanted to bring council's attention to Chris's report. He identifies that the height being requested is 24 feet. Today, when I was reviewing the application for the public meeting and I went back to the application, the owner is actually requesting 25 feet, and that's what the public notice said. So I just wanted to bring that to council's attention. So you'll see that in Chris's report that it's 24, but it really is 25. Comments have been received from Kawartha Conservation Authority stating they have no objection to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. In addition, we have received an email from an adjacent property owner, Ann and David Harper, and they are in support of the application. This concludes a summary of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment application. Mr. Mayor, I now turn it over to you for the public input portion of the meeting. And as a reminder, if anyone at this time would like to use the raise a hand feature if they're in the virtual gallery, or raise their hand if they're in the physical gallery, so they are able to be promoted in order to make an oral submission.
Okay, thank you very much for your report, Adele Arbor. Okay, is there anyone in the virtual or physical gallery that would like to speak to this item on our agenda? I'm seeing no one in the physical gallery. Is there anyone virtually like to speak to this?
I'm not seeing any hands.
Okay, we have no hands. Is there any questions from any members of council for this file? I'm seeing none. Go ahead, Councilor Fraser.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to Adele. So in the recommendations, the 2 options. Now the height you had mentioned, the applicant in his application or their application, they have it listed as 25 feet.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct.
Okay, and I guess the allowable or acceptable height would be 24 feet. Is that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. No, it was just, I believe it was a typo in Chris's report.
Okay.
It said 7.32 meters, and it really should have been 7.32. So Chris's report, sorry, said 7.32 meters, and it should have really been 7.62 to represent the 25 feet. Our public notice that was circulated to the agencies and to the public represented the correct amount of 25 feet. So when we get to the reports, I will correct that in the recommendation as we go forward.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Armstrong.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. I'd also, just to clarify, we have a proposed structure with a height of 25 feet, and the bylaw allows 16 feet as the maximum. Why do we have the 16 feet? And is that pretty much adhered to?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there are numerous applications that come forward to the Committee of Adjustment as well in terms of increasing heights of accessory structures. Our bylaw does have a requirement of 16 feet, but as any application for a minor variance or a zoning bylaw amendment, individuals or property owners could ask for an increase. This is an engineered steel building, and their request is for the 25 feet. And based on Chris's site visit, there is a backhoe and numerous equipment on the property. And I'm assuming that the property owners in their application have said it was for personal storage. So if they have these large pieces of equipment on their property, I'm sure they're looking to store it within that building. And I'm not sure if they are in attendance this afternoon. You may want to ask them some further questions regarding the use of that structure.
And I think that some of that machinery needs a larger building to back into. And I think this is quite a common theme where our zoning bylaws seems to be a little bit antiquated, where almost everybody's asking for a little more height for obvious reasons. And this is one of those circumstances, I think. Go ahead, Councillor Brayberg.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to Adele again, if I may. So under the recommendations again, the two recommendations. So the first recommendation is basically asking for the applicant to do something. And the second recommendation is basically directing staff to do something, in lack of better reference. Is number two, the second recommendation, is it the same result as if number one would have been adopted?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there are two different scenarios. If council didn't feel that the requested height was justified in the zoning that the property has, as Chris's report identified, usually larger height accessory buildings are permitted in a rural zone, but this is a shoreline residential, so typically you don't see that height as a permission in our zoning bylaw. So Chris is suggesting that if you don't like the height or what it's being recommended for, perhaps you can defer the application and ask them to reduce the floor area and the height of their building. However, there is no restriction in our zoning bylaw on the size. And so they are requesting 2,400 square feet, which we have no regulation to control that size. The only control we have in the zoning bylaw is that height restriction. They're meeting all the other zone requirements. They're setbacks to the lot line. They're meeting the size. The only thing that they're not meeting is that height. So if council is satisfied, I guess that would deter recommendation number one. And if council is satisfied with the application and their request to increase the height, the second one is to direct staff to prepare a zoning bylaw amendment that would recognize that height of 25 feet.
Thank you.
And just one observation that I did make was it is 60 some odd meters from the water, so it's not going to affect our shoreline. And the neighbor that's going to be affected most is okay with it. And again, this is a common theme where it seems like some of our bylaws need to be updated a little bit. Okay, any other comments or questions? Would the applicant like to speak?
No.
Okay. We can, I think, go ahead.
We don't make any motions at this point.
No, we'll wait till
Gotcha.
when we're back into our regular. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Armstrong.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Lamson. Just a comment, I've forgotten, we're not making motions now. I've always felt that when we have exceptions that are approved through the Committee of Adjustments, we need to be keeping track of those, because it says that either our bylaw is antiquated, exactly as you said, or else we're being too lenient. So I'm hoping that when we redo our comprehensive zoning bylaw, which is coming up, once the official plan is in place, blah, 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 that we look to the Committee of Adjustments to bring forward those kinds of repeated exceptions that appear to be happening, so that that can be input to the bylaw updates.
Good comment, Deputy Armstrong. Go ahead, Councillor Trent.
I don't want this to turn into a debate on bylaws, but 16 feet might be appropriate if you have a neighbor right behind you or right beside you for the size of the building. I think, for my personal feelings, if it impacts the neighbors, then that impacts my decision. And this case obviously doesn't impact the neighbors.
Okay, any other comments or questions? I'm seeing none. We can move on to item 6.2 of our agenda. And Adele, would you like to speak to this item, please?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor, this is a public meeting for file number 2323 to consider a zoning bylaw amendment submitted by agent James Bouchard on behalf of property owner 1816450 Ontario Inc., Denny DeRucci, for the property municipally known as 130 Philrick Drive. The purpose of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is a condition of severance B16822 for a lot addition to the benefiting property municipally known as 11 Fire Route 89. The lands being added to the benefiting lands are zoned rural, while the benefiting lands are currently zoned shoreline residential private access, special exception 87. To prevent a split zoned lot, the severed lands are being rezoned to shoreline residential private access, special exception 87, to reflect the zone category of the benefiting lot. There is a planning report attached to today's agenda in support of the zoning bylaw amendment. The planning report identifies that the application is consistent with provincial policies and meets the purpose and intent of the official plan and zoning bylaw. No comments have been received from agencies circulated or from the public. However, staff have responded to a couple of inquiries regarding the application for clarification. Staff are in receipt of a new consent application to relocate the existing fire route that is shown as parts 2, 3, and 4 on the reference plan. This concludes a summary of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment application. Mr. Mayor, I now turn it over to you for the public input portion of the meeting. And again, if anyone at this time would like to use the raise a hand feature if they're in the virtual gallery, or physically raise their hand if they're in the physical gallery, so we are able to promote them in order to make an oral submission. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Adele Arbor, our planner. Is there anyone in the physical gallery that would like to speak to this item? Seeing none. Is there anyone raising their hand in the virtual gallery? We are seeing none. Does anyone on council have any questions or comments for Adele? I'm seeing none. We can move on to item 6.3 of our agenda. And Adele Arbor, our planner, can you please introduce this file?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor, this is our third and last public meeting for this afternoon, and it's a public meeting for file number 24-01 to consider a zoning bylaw amendment submitted by agent Riley Martins of Timberline Custom Homes on behalf of property owners Carlo and Emily Travaglini for the property municipally known as 36 Fire Route 14. The subject lot is a shoreline lot on Lower Buckhorn Lake with an irregular shoreline frontage of approximately 967 feet and a lot area of approximately 1.3 acres. The applicant's lot is currently occupied by a dwelling with a partial second story with a ground floor area of 1,220 square feet and a total floor area of 1,700 square feet. There is also a detached garage with a ground floor area of 411 square feet. The applicant is proposing to demolish the existing dwelling and construct a replacement two-story dwelling with an attached garage and an attached deck on the lakeside. The replacement dwelling is proposed to have a ground floor area of 1,860 square feet and a total floor area of 2,300 square feet, with an attached deck with a floor area of 464 square feet. The purpose of the application is to seek relief from the comprehensive zoning bylaw minimum water yard setback for both the dwelling and attached lake-facing deck, as well as the regulated flood level. The proposed dwelling setback to the high water mark is proposed at 9.4 meters at the southwest corner of the dwelling, and the lake-facing deck will be set back approximately 7.5 meters from the high water mark. It is also important to note that the regulated flood level is 244.3 to 243.9. The applicants have submitted a floodplain letter prepared by Engage Engineering in support of the proposed application and recommended that the finished floor elevation of the proposed dwelling should be placed at least 0.3 meters above the floodplain elevation, putting the finished floor elevation at 244.31. As well, consideration should be given for floodproofing of the proposed dwelling below this elevation. There is a planning report on the agenda from the municipality's planning consultant, Chris Jones. Chris's report is in support of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment and states the application is consistent with provincial policy statement, the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. In addition, the proposed zoning bylaw amendment meets the general intent of the official plan and zoning bylaw. The property owner has executed the site plan development agreement that had been circulated for signatures, and circulation of the application to neighboring property owners and agencies did not garner any comments. This concludes a summary of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment application. Mr. Mayor, I now turn it over to you for the public component of this meeting.
Okay, thank you very much, Adele Arbor. Is there anyone in the physical gallery that would like to speak to this item? I'm seeing none. Is there anyone in the virtual gallery that would like to speak to this item?
I see.
We have no hands. Is there anyone on council that would have a question of Adele? I'm seeing none. We can move on to our next item on our agenda, which is the motion to reconvene our regular council meeting. Councillor Franzen for a mover. Councillor Braybrook for a seconder. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion is carried. We are now back into our regular council meeting, and we can move on to item 7 of our agenda, which is business arising out of the statutory public meeting. And Adele Arbor, our planner, can you speak to item 7.1, please?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Subsequent to today's public meeting for file number 23-22, at this time, planning staff recommend that council receive the report from the planner and the following 2 options be considered. 1, to defer the application and request the applicant to reduce the floor area and height of the proposed storage building, or secondly, direct staff to prepare a zoning bylaw amendment for council's consideration to authorize the construction of the proposed storage building in the shoreline residential zone having a floor area of 2,400 square feet and a height of 25 feet.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anyone want to speak about this or have a motion? Go ahead, Councillor Braybrook.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to receive and also a motion to direct staff to prepare a zoning bylaw amendment for council's consideration to authorize the construction of the proposed garage storage building in a shoreline residential zoning having a floor area of 2,400 square feet and a height of 24 feet or 25 feet.
Okay, thank you for that motion. Do I have a seconder for that motion? I see Councillor Cadigan for a seconder. Any other conversation? I'm seeing none. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion is carried. Okay. Now, Arbor, our planner, can you move on to item 7.2 of our agenda and please speak to this file?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor, subsequent to today's public meeting held for file number 2323, At this time, planning staff recommend that council receive the report from the planner and further that council approve the zoning bylaw amendment reflecting the recommendations of this report, which is on today's agenda for consideration.
Okay, thank you very much, Adele Arbor. Anyone have any questions or comments or is prepared to make a motion? The Deputy Mayor Armstrong, go ahead.
I will make the motion to receive the report and to approve the zoning bylaw amendment as recommended by staff.
Okay, thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Armstrong and Councillor Braybrook for a seconder. Any conversation? I'm seeing none. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. Okay, we can move on now to item 7.3 of our agenda. And Adele, can you introduce one more file, please?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Subsequent to the public meeting held today for file number 24-01, at this time, planning staff are recommending that council receive the report from the external planning consultant, Chris Jones. And further, as the property owners have signed the site plan development agreement, council approved the zoning bylaw amendment, which is on today's agenda for consideration.
Okay, thank you very much, Adele. It's nice to see that site plan come in on time. Any other conversation or questions? Is anyone prepared to make a motion? Let's see, Councillor Braybrook for mover.
Thank you. Make a motion to receive and with the second was subject to confirmation the applicant has executed. It is recommended council approve the attached zoning bylaw amendment.
Okay, perfect. And we have received the site plan.
Okay.
Would anyone like to second that motion? Councillor Franzen for a seconder. Any other conversations? I'm seeing none. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. Thank you very much, Adele. We can move on to item 8 of our agenda, which is presentation. And I would like, Luciano, can you please take the chair there? Buckhorn Community Improvement Plan Review. You can proceed at your leisure.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Pleased to be here. And I understand magic happens in Trent Lakes. And when I say next slide, somebody puts up the next slide, which is really nice. Just to give you a little background on myself, I've been through my company, RCI Consulting, specializing in community improvement plans for the last 20 plus years. And I believe this is the 50th community improvement plan I prepared in Ontario. I did in fact prepare the Selwyn Township Community Improvement Plan originally quite a few years ago, and then have also completed 2 updates to that plan, I think with the last one being 2018, if I'm not mistaken. Next slide, please. So what I'd like to do today is take a little bit of time to cover the basics on community improvement plans, what they can and cannot do, talk about your current Buckhorn Community Improvement Plan, including how we reviewed it, what some of the findings were, key findings, in fact, and then look at the draft community improvement project area, which is the area to which the incentive programs apply, where they can be offered, in other words, and the draft incentive programs that we've come up with, and then talk about next steps. So really, the purpose of today's update is 1, to inform council on progress to date on the CIP review and update, 2, obtain your input on things like the community improvement goals, the draft community improvement project area, and the draft incentive programs designed to achieve the goals of the plan, and thirdly, to answer any questions that you may have. And in fact, we wanted to make sure that council was fully aware of the draft community improvement project area, the incentive programs, and so on, before we take that out for public consumption and input. So today's your first opportunity to sort of provide comments, input. If we need to make any changes, of course we will. And then, as I will mention later, we have a public meeting, informal public meeting in 3 weeks, less than 3 weeks now. There will also be another opportunity, both for council and for the public, to comment on this plan when we have the final Planning Act public meeting prior to the plan being adopted and approved. Okay, so there's lots of opportunities still to change change the key details of this plan. Next slide, please. So what it boils down to is that the community improvement plan is a framework that allows the municipality to provide grants and loans to property owners and tenants, or assignees as they're known, to promote building and property renovations, improvements, and redevelopment within a defined area of need. And that defined area is called the community improvement project area. So a community improvement plan really is an enabling plan that can be used by council to leverage private sector investment with public sector investment. It allows council to decide which incentive programs in the CIP it will implement. So that can be all of them, it can be some of them, or it can be none of them. And that's why we call it an enabling plan. All right. In other words, a municipality must adopt a community improvement plan if it wishes to have the ability to provide grants and loans to promote community improvement, but it is under no obligation to offer any of those incentive programs if it elects not to do so. And once it has offered one or more of those incentive programs, it doesn't have to offer them for a set period of time. You can simply discontinue the programs whenever you see fit. So really, council is in full control of a community improvement plan. Now, I should caution that yes, over time, they can produce significant results. We've seen some good results in Selwyn Township, but it is a long-term strategy. It's not a quick fix. So I caution against offering programs for a year or two or three and then getting rid of them because that's not going to accomplish that much. And finally, they should be, community improvement plans should be monitored and periodically reviewed and updated, just like we're doing with this plan. Really, the guideline is it should be treated like an official plan. You should review and update it every 5 years. With this being 8 years now, since this plan was adopted, it's time. Next slide, please. So the current CIP offers 3 incentive programs. There's a landscape improvement grant, which provides a grant equal to 50% of the cost of landscaping, curbing, decorative walls, and driveway access and egress improvements to commercial, mixed-use, and institutional properties to a maximum grant of $5,000. There's an improved signage grant, which offers 50% of the cost of replacing existing business sign or commercial on a commercial building to a maximum grant of $1,000. Now, in other municipalities, you'll often see that signage grant included as part of the facade grant. So they're not necessarily separate programs. And then the third program is a building improvement grant or loan. It offers a grant equal to 50% of the cost of eligible building improvement works to a maximum grant of $10,000 or a 50% loan to a maximum loan of $20,000. So, you know, when we look at all of this, and in terms of the building improvement grant loan and the signage grant, they have to, the proposed sign or building improvement must conform to the Buckhorn Hamlet Core Design Guidelines and the Trent Lakes Design Guidelines. And that will continue in the new CIP. Okay, so that staff and council have an opportunity to influence the design of the proposed community improvement. Now, looking at these 3 programs and looking at other best practice municipalities, they're not really that competitive in terms of the amounts that are offered and the number of programs and what they cover. Okay, so that was one of the things we tried to address in the review and update. Next slide, please. So how did we undertake this review? Well, we did we used a fairly comprehensive methodology. I worked with a senior project management team, which is senior staff in planning, building, your treasurer, and economic development. So we had all the key people at the table. We've had 3 meetings to date to review findings, obtain input, and so we did a detailed review of the current document, and it is sort of weak in a few areas, and we identified those areas, and we, you know, put in place fixes to those weaknesses. I, along with Adele, did a study areas tour, driving and walking tour of all 6 rural settlement areas in Trent Lakes, noting land uses, zoning, building, and property conditions. I reviewed the uptake of the current programs, which we'll talk about in a moment. Reviewed key policy and planning documents, which really should provide the basic direction for the community improvement plan. conducted a best practices review of community improvement plans and offered programs in 6 other rural municipalities with tourism service areas. Those include, of course, Selwyn Township, the municipality of Center Hastings, the township of Minden Hills, the city of Kawartha Lakes, municipality of North Bruce Peninsula, and the municipality of Trent Hill. So we tried to look at best practices in similar municipalities that, as I said, were rural in nature, but also had a tourism service area. So trying as much as possible to compare apples with apples. Okay. We reviewed the current community improvement needs, goals, and programs, gaps, and weaknesses, developed, and then we moved on to develop the revised goals, the community improvement project area, and the incentive program. So again, today is the day we present that to you and get your input and feedback. Next slide, please. So in terms of the current CIP, we found really not that much connection to the key policy documents. So that was one of the weaknesses, and we've definitely rectified that. The community improvement goals in the current CIP do not reflect emerging community improvement needs and policy directions. And again, you'll see this in a lot of municipalities where they're trying to promote some gentle intensification, affordable rental housing, well-designed built form, energy efficient site design, and full accessibility. Okay, so again, in being aware of that, you'll see how we try to address some of those issues in the proposed draft incentive programs. The program eligibility requirements in the current CIP really lack some important details. As I said, I've been doing this for 23 years. I found them somewhat confusing. And I also noted that they may not fully protect the municipality's planning and financial interests. So we've now developed quite a comprehensive set of general program requirements to address that issue. As I mentioned, the 3 current incentive programs offered in the CIP are somewhat limited in terms of both their comprehensiveness and competitiveness compared to other best practice municipalities who not only offer more programs and higher grant amounts, but cover a wider range of eligible costs. Okay. The current building improvement grant loan program is restricted only to owners. That's really a negative because it should also be open to tenants. So if you have a long-term commercial tenant, it could be a retail store, it could be a restaurant, they may want to undertake the improvements, and all the owner has to do is say, okay, I'm okay with that, I'm assigning the grant to you, so that the municipality can just deal with that tenant. Okay. And there's no real monitoring program or marketing strategy specified in the community improvement plan. These are both key implementation elements, and we are working on a monitoring program and a marketing strategy for the new CIP. Next slide. So here's the incentive program uptake. Basically, this is 8 years worth of data back to 2016 when the CIP was approved. And you'll see that, in 2017, you had 1 application. In 2018, you had 4. And then it dropped down to 2 in 2019, 1 in 2020, and none in the last 3 years. So this sort of jump up a couple of years, year and a half, 2 years after the CIP was adopted is what you expect to see. We call that the lag effect. So when a CIP and new incentive programs are put in place, it usually takes a year to 2 years for potential applicants to understand the programs, make application, and that's why you'll see that bump up. But then it fell off, and no applications in the last 3 years is very concerning. So based on the size and the number of businesses in the Buckhorn Community Improvement Project area, I would have expected to see more applications over that 8-year period. Okay, so that's one of the things we're going to try to address by making the incentive programs more attractive, by providing a marketing strategy that will entail enhanced marketing of those programs. That's really important because people have to know about the programs, they have to know how to apply, and they have to know what to expect once they do apply. Next slide, please. So again, based on the policies, the gaps in the current CIP, and strategic input from the project management team members, the key community improvement needs and goals identified are obviously enhancing economic development, diversity, and vitality through renovation, infill, intensification, and redevelopment. Better designs, plans, and drawings equals better built form. This is something not only that planner and your chief building official told us, but it's something I've seen time and again in many other municipalities I've worked in. If that front end of the process, if you're providing a little bit of funding so that applicants can go out and hire professionals to do their drawings, you end up with a better product at the end, a better building, better design, more visually appealing, and so on. We want to promote projects that preserve, restore, and improve the heritage and historical buildings and are more sensitive to local cultural heritage. We want to somehow try and promote affordable housing, especially for younger residents who you want to attract to Trent Lakes, and that typically means rental housing. We want to promote barrier-free accessibility upgrades to existing buildings, energy efficiency and sustainable site design, and more off-season tourism uses. So those are sort of the key community improvement needs and goals that we've identified. Next slide, please. So when we toured the Buckhorn area, Adele and I spent some time doing that, and we identified several commercial building vacancies and underutilization of some existing buildings, and that's kind of been an ongoing problem for some time. Most of these buildings are older 1- and 2-story wooden buildings, ranging from fair, some good, to poor condition. So a number of them are in need of community improvement. What types of community improvements would benefit the area? Well, facade improvements, including, as I said earlier, signage, storefront, lighting, barrier-free accessibility. Building improvements, including new or upgraded windows and doors, weatherproofing, being able to build outdoor cafes and spaces, intensification, residential intensification, infill and redevelopment, enhanced landscaping features and pedestrian amenities, and paving of parking lots and driveway access egress improvements. That was a big one when I did the tour. That one, I would say more so than other municipalities of similar size and nature, was especially sort of a community improvement need that needs to be addressed. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, Adele and I toured all 6 rural settlement areas in Trent Lakes. I took photos and notes on current land uses, building and property conditions, reviewed the official plan designations and zoning. And in consultation with both Adele and the project management team, I determined that with the exception of Buckhorn, none of the other cores of the rural settlement areas exhibit what we call critical mass or nucleus needed to meet the minimum test of community improvement need. Okay, so you might have one store there, you might have one small use, but it's really not meeting that minimum test of, do you have a nucleus that we can in fact designate for community improvement, and will it happen? It's not just about designating it, the question is, will it happen? So that's what we came up with. We examined the current Buckhorn Community Improvement Project area boundary and identified a few areas for removal, a few for addition, really just a fine tuning of the area, not a major overhaul based on designated land uses and community improvement needs. But one thing I did note is that in the current plan, the community improvement project area is very loosely defined, almost as if someone had drawn it freehand. And you will see that when I put up the graphic of the current and the proposed. And the problem with that is it splits a number of properties in half. And you really don't want that. That is just going to result in disputes regarding property eligibility, and it's not in keeping with current best practices for community improvement project areas. So we developed or delineated a new community improvement project area based on property boundaries. But what I did, and I've been doing this in CIPs for a number of years now, is to incorporate some flexibility at the boundaries if a property is immediately adjacent to the designated community improvement project area boundary. In that situation, staff can recommend and council can approve an expansion to include that property, okay, if it meets the goals of the community improvement plan. However, that does not alter the map. So now the next property can't sort of tack onto that. And what that does is it prevents creep of the community improvement project area, but still allows council the flexibility to include a project and a property that meets the goals of the community improvement plan that is right at the boundary. Next slide, please. So here's the current community improvement project area. As you can see, as I mentioned, it actually does split properties in half. It's sort of drawn freehand. I'm not sure what the issue at the time was. Maybe it was they didn't want to do the detailed property by property analysis that we did. But if we can go to the next slide, you'll see how we clean this up. Okay, so now you know very clearly if you're in or out. And if you're out, but you're immediately adjacent to that red line, so not across the road, immediately adjacent, then if the project meets the goals of the plan, then it can be considered for inclusion. Next slide, please. And again, I want to stress that these are drafts at this point. We're going to be out there in less than 3 weeks for public consumption, and we'll take that information, we'll take the, the input that you give us today, and then there will be another opportunity at the end of the process to comment and change these. Now, in terms of the draft incentive programs, as I mentioned earlier, now we have detailed general program requirements. And we've developed a package of 6 potential incentive programs for inclusion in the CIP that we think not only address the community improvement needs and goals, but will be competitive with best practices in other municipalities. And each program has a clear list of eligible costs and requirements. And again, implementation timing of the programs is entirely at the discretion of council. And in fact, we've even developed a prioritization for the programs if you wish to introduce some now, some down the road. A similar approach was taken in Selwyn Township, where they actually have 9 programs in their CIP, but they only launched 4. And they've done quite well with those 4. Next slide, please. So I'll go through these programs. Happy to answer any questions you have about them, but the first is, as I said, better drawings, better designs equals better buildings, is a design and feasibility study grant program, which covers architectural and design drawings, heritage impact assessments, site plans, and this would be a grant equal to 50% of the cost of those studies to a maximum grant of $2,000 per study and a maximum of 2 studies per project. So someone could come in and say, I want to do architectural drawings. Oh, and by the way, we think there's some environmental on the site. We want to do a phase 2 environmental site assessment. Okay, well, then you can have a maximum grant of 50% for $2,000 per study for both studies. The next program is a facade improvement grant, which, as I said, includes all kinds of facade improvements, lighting, storefront improvements, all of those things. And that's a 50% grant to a maximum grant of $7,500 per project. The third program is a building and property improvement grant program, which covers 50% of the cost of interior and exterior building improvements to a maximum grant of $10,000 per project. Now, we'll mention this later, but if someone wants to do a facade improvement, but also wants to do interior improvements, they would be eligible to apply to both program number 2 and program number 3. So all of the programs I'm going to describe to you can be used in tandem together, or as we call stacked. They can be stacked as long as the project meets the eligibility requirements for each program. Next slide, please. So here's the rental, residential, and affordability grant program. Again, this is designed to try and get more second floor units, for example, in Buckhorn, and upgrade any existing rental units. So we're focusing just on rental here, and this grant covers 50% of the cost of renovating existing rental units in mixed-use buildings to building code, okay, fire code, etc., or converting or constructing new rental units. And the maximum grant is $5,000 per unit and a maximum of 3 units per project. Now, if the units are affordable and will be maintained as affordable, you get an extra $5,000, again, based at 50%. Affordable is defined as per the provincial policy statement, and it means the least expensive of 1, a unit for which rent does not exceed 30% of gross annual household income for low and moderate income households, or 2, a unit for which rent is at or below the average market rent of a unit in the regional market area. And I will note, and we've done this with a number of things in this plan to make sure that it stays timely and it's flexible, that definition of affordability is placed in an appendix to the plan, which can be changed at any time without a formal amendment to the plan. Okay, so if the municipality wanted to make it more onerous or less onerous, you simply change that definition in the appendix. After you've gotten a few applications and you feel, oh, maybe we should tighten this up or loosen it up, you can do that quite easily. One of the requirements of this program is that the applicant must enter into an agreement with the municipality to maintain the units as rental, and if they're affordable, also as affordable for at least 20 years, and that agreement gets registered on title. So if the owner sells that property, the new owner knows they have to do that. Next slide, please. The tax increment grant program, this uses the property tax increase generated by a project to provide a grant equal to 80% of the increase in municipal property taxes for up to 10 years, but only for what we're calling substantial projects. We don't want to do this for little projects. We wanted to make sure that these projects were sort of larger projects that would generate a significant property tax increase. And we've defined substantial projects as commercial mixed-use projects that can be renovation, expansion, or new construction, or projects that create multiple rental residential units that generate a minimum increase of assessment value of $200,000. So somebody was to come in and say, I want to build a small apartment building with 3 stories, 9 units, let's say, whatever, okay? They would be eligible to get up to 3 units of the grant, and if they were affordable, up to $10,000 for each unit, and then they would be eligible for this tax increment grant program. So again, an example of how the programs can be combined, and when you do that, some projects start to look more attractive than if you say, well, if you use this program, you can't use this one. And I've seen some municipalities do that, and it usually does not work out for them. So this is really the best practice approach. And finally is the planning and building fees grant program, where you get a grant of 75% of planning application fees, building permits, et cetera, but it has to be for a project that's taking advantage of one of the other programs. Okay, so it can't just be somebody showing up and say, hey, I paid my planning fees last year, can I get them back? No, you had to have been approved under one of the other programs and actually built something. So this would be, you pay first, you get it back once the project's complete, inspected, and occupied. Maximum grant, $5,000 per project. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, we've, the project management team and myself, we put our heads together and said, you know, if council wants to implement these programs in a phased approach, here are the priorities. So your design and feasibility study grant, facade and building improvement would be priority 1, and then the rental residential affordability grant, tax increment grant, and planning and building fees grant would be 2. Obviously, if you only implement the priority 1s, you're potentially not going to get as much community improvement activity versus implementing all of them. That will be a decision you can make later on in the process, but you can also start thinking about it now. My understanding, based on discussions with the treasurer, is that, you know, looking forward, this plan won't be adopted and approved until May or June. So the monies that are in the budget for 2024 for the community improvement plan will be more than enough to cover any grants before the end of the year. And then as time goes forward, you may have to start looking at marginal incremental increases. But, you know, that's the cost of success. And typically, again, remember, there is that lag effect. So even if you adopt the plan in the middle of 2024, you're really not going to start seeing applications rolling until late 2025 and into 2026. Next slide. So finally, that brings us to next steps. And as I said, I'm happy to receive your input today, looking forward to it. Happy to try and answer any questions. We will then revise the goals, the community improvement project area, the draft programs as necessary. And then we have a stakeholder and public consultation meeting scheduled for March 7th. So I'll be back here on March 7th. That presentation will be similar to this one, except it'll have a little bit more details on what's eligible under each program, for example. Okay. We will then review the comments received during and after that stakeholder public consultation meeting. We'll provide an avenue for participants to obviously provide comments at the meeting, but also afterwards through a comment sheet. I'll take all of that, meet with the project management team, and sort of decide, okay, what are the final revisions we need to make, and then produce a draft final community improvement plan. That draft final community improvement plan will be circulated to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing and prescribed agencies for their comment. It'll be revised based on any comments we receive from them, and then and only then will we have the statutory Planning Act public meeting with the required notice of public meeting in advance and the draft plan being available in advance. We would then present that final community improvement plan to council for consideration. That can either be done at the public meeting or it can be done after the public meeting. And then council will consider adoption of the bylaw through, adoption of the final community improvement plan through passing of a bylaw to designate the community improvement project area and another bylaw to actually adopt the plan. Once that plan is adopted by council, there's a 20-day appeal period. If there are no appeals, the plan is automatically approved after the 20th day. So that's my presentation. I thank you for your patience. I know it was a bit lengthy, but we thought it was really important to get this in front of council now before we take it out to the public. So if there are any changes or revision council would like to make, we can make those before we take it out to the public.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. Does anyone on council have any questions or comments? Go ahead, Councilor Francis.
I have a couple questions. The community improvement plan, does Selwyn have one for Buckhorn, and does City of Forth Lake have one for Kinmount?
I'm sorry, your question was through Mr. Mayor.
Does Selwyn have a community improvement plan for their portion of Buckhorn?
Okay, yes, they do. And it's very similar to yours. And it's similar to the programs they offer in the rest of Selwyn.
Okay.
Okay.
And does the City of Forth Lakes have a city
Councilor
an
Francis,
improvement plan?
They do.
Make sure your questions go through the chair.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's okay. Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, City of Kawartha Lakes has a community improvement plan. That's one of the ones we looked at in terms of the best
Okay.
practices municipalities.
Just one follow-up question,
Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor. There are two significant sites in the Trent Lake portion of Kinmount, the Fairgrounds and the Legion. It would be important that somehow that they could be included in an improvement plan.
Okay, through you, Mr. Mayor. So we did look at that. And yes, I'm looking at my notes from the tours. So yes, Legion Hall, I guess there's a small medical center. The Tourist Information Center and the Edgewater Grill are outside. They're in Kinmount, but they're outside of Trent Lakes.
Yeah.
So my professional opinion was that there wasn't enough there to support designation of a community improvement project area in terms of the critical mass, the nucleus.
Okay.
However, if the direction from council is we'd like to designate a community improvement project area for Kinmount so that it would apply, the CIP would apply to both Buckhorn and Kinmount, I can do that, but I think that direction needs to come from council.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there any other questions? Deputy Mayor Armstrong, go ahead.
Thank you. And through you, Mayor Lamson, I have 2 questions and 2 comments.
Please go ahead.
The first question is, we saw 8 projects approved in the last 8 years. Do you know what the dollar figure is associated with those?
I don't know off the top of my head. They were not huge projects. They were minor facade improvements, landscaping improvements, those sorts of things.
So I'm guessing $30,000 to $40,000 range.
If the treasurer's online, then they could probably answer that question. I don't have the actual background report that I
that's
did,
fine.
but it's in there. Yeah, that sounds like it's probably in the ballpark. Yeah.
And the second question is, are you at a point where you have a recommended annual budget amount for this going forward?
Okay, so there is a current budget amount. Can I defer that to the treasurer?
Go ahead, Adele. I think our treasurer's having a bit of a sick day.
Oh,
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I believe when the CIP was first approved, the amount was $50,000. And after 3 years, I believe we dropped it down to $35,000 as the budgeted amount per year. Okay, and as Luch has mentioned, that we haven't had any uptake in the last few years on the CIP.
I'm kind of understanding the lack of uptake in the last 2 or 3 years. Pandemic and post-pandemic conditions are not exactly conducive to improving your building when you're barely surviving. So
Yeah.
I do understand that. Go ahead.
through Mr. Mayor, if I may sort of complete the answer to that question, is that I would see that the 35,000 you currently have budgeted would be obviously fine for the balance of 2024 and probably sufficient for 2025. After that, you may be wanting to increase it a bit, but we're not talking, doubling or tripling it. You have to remember that the time lag between when someone applies or a facade improvement grant or a building improvement grant. And when you actually pay it out can be anywhere from 6 months to a year, year and a half. So a lot of times what will happen is a community improvement plan will get passed. The council will say, okay, let's up our budget right away. And then the money doesn't get used the next year, all of it. And they're kind of scratching their heads. Well, did it work? Didn't it work? Then the following year they get hit, right? And some have made the mistake of, oh, well, we didn't use the 50,000. Let's pull it back to 25. And then the following year they end up with 50,000 of applications. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, thank you.
May-
Go ahead.
should I
Yeah, go ahead. Continue. Yes.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Lamson. The first comment is the most significant factor in why we haven't had more is simply awareness. Members of the Economic Development Committee went into the community last year, spoke with the business owners, many of whom had made substantial investments in upgrading their properties and had no idea that this program existed. And we're kind of saddened to know that they'd spent all of the money themselves. So I think number one, clear everywhere, we need to understand that that is the biggest problem we have had. The second comment is I was frankly very surprised in your methodology that you didn't talk to the business owners. I appreciate that we're going to have a public open house. I appreciate there'll be many opportunities, but they're the ultimate customers for this program. And with any program that you do, to me, it's pretty basic. You talk to the customers as well as ourselves to find out what are their plans, what do they need, what would be most helpful. So I was really surprised and disappointed. I mean, I think it's a very excellent report and some really good recommendations. So I appreciate the work that's been done, and I thank you for bringing it forward. It needs a big refresh, but I was just really struck by the fact that we didn't get input from the people who might benefit from this program.
So to respond to that through Mr. Mayor, that is really the intention of the meeting next week. My understanding, and Adele and I were discussing this today, is once we're done here today, that invitations will go out to all of the property owners within the current Buckhorn Community Improvement Project area to attend that meeting. If any of them want to speak to me afterwards directly about plans they might have or things that they want to change, I'm more than happy to make myself available to do that. But I've seen where consultants went out to the public beforehand on this, and then council said, wait a sec, we didn't even know you were going to do that. And we don't like some of the things that are in there. So that's why we decided to do it this way. So we will be speaking to them. Happy to hear from them and incorporate any revisions or changes they want to see to the goals, to the programs, to the community improvement project area. But we felt we needed to get it in front of council first.
Okay, go ahead. Yes, please.
I can be satisfied with that, as long as we do have, in fact, personalized invitations to all of those businesses. They're only, 15 or 20. It's not like a whole lot. So that's why, in part, I was surprised it wasn't done up front, but I also appreciate it's easier for them to provide input if they have something to look at, rather than a complete blank piece of paper. So with that proviso that they get personalized invitations to the open house, I will accept that as an answer. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, any other comments or questions? Go ahead, Councillor Braber.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Thanks very much, Luciano, for your presentation. I echo Deputy Mayor Armstrong's comments and I'll add to that as far as what I was hoping to see on this and within the boundary that you've laid out here. And as Deputy Mayor Armstrong alluded to, there's only 20 or so, give or take, properties that would be affected by this community improvement plan. Me having owned a property right downtown, right in the thick of things, and trying to apply what you were speaking of as far as the draft incentive programs, what I would have liked to have seen when you're speaking about point number 4, rental residential, I'd like to see an inventory of how many within that space are actually rentals, and whether it's a redundant exercise or a moot point as far as providing those incentives for the rentals. I would like to know, what we're targeting and that sort of thing. And when I was living right downtown, I frequented all the businesses, which isn't hard to do. It's a 30-second walk to either way. So it's really, it's not a big exercise to go out and actually not just go in, have a chat with them, in addition to inviting them somewhere. But it'd be nice to go down and meet them in their place of business and that sort of thing. And then maybe a hand delivery of we're having a meeting in addition to something else. But I think if you're going to be doing any revisions to the draft, I don't know if that can be something that can be considered as far as more of an inventory of what we're actually dealing with and how any of these draft incentive programs will apply or could apply to these various properties within that community improvement plan location. That's what I mean, we've gone through, we did the open spaces master plan and that was massive. And a lot of the feedback I got from a lot of the residents that were impacted or could be impacted by a trail and that sort of thing. And key stakeholders that weren't, interviewed or weren't spoken to be included in the open spaces master plan. I just want to get into a general overview of, and this is a small enough area to get in there and know who's who in the zoo, so to speak. I would just like to know what we're dealing with, know the people that we're dealing with, whether they own it and what their plans are and that sort of thing, and then build the community improvement plan incentives around that, around good data, as opposed to just saying, okay, here's that area, we see some businesses, we're going to invite people out and that sort of thing. It'd be nice to have a bit of research on that, but I appreciate your efforts on that.
Yeah.
And happy 50th. Was it? Is this your 50th?
It's my 50th community improvement plan. Yeah. Through you, Mr. Mayor, obviously that would be an expanded scope of work for the project. Having said that, if there were, once the invitations go out and we see who comes to the meeting, who expresses interest, if there were, they wanted to set up some virtual meetings or something like that, I could certainly do that. Again, there would be, obviously it's an expanded scope of work, and so there'd have to be an expanded budget. One of the things when you start getting into asking owners of mixed use buildings or commercial buildings, are you renting out 1 unit or 2 units? Sometimes it's difficult to get a straight answer because those units may not be legal, and so they don't want to admit that they're renting units. Based on my experience and what I saw, there's a fair amount of second floor space that's underutilized. There's a fair amount of first floor space that's underutilized, but definitely second floor space that's underutilized that could be converted for residential units. So, I mean, look, the bottom line is if in 5 years you added 10 rental units to the Buckhorn commercial core, that's a win. That's potentially 20, 25 people more shopping down there and using the services, right? So we're not talking about going from 8 applications over 8 years to 80. We're talking about hopefully doubling that number over the next 5 years or 6 years. Okay.
Thank you, Councilor Mayor. Just to follow up, I appreciate that, Luciano, and I'm just back to the rental. Haven't been down there. There's maybe 3, if that.
Yeah.
And the area as far as new builds and that, it's not going to happen in the next 10 years in that area. So again, I'll just harken back to, let's build something around data that we know and that sort of, so it's more specific.
Right. That's right. So through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm open to that. Perhaps that's a discussion you can have with Adele, and if there's a desire to sort of meet with some of the business owners after the public meeting individually to find out whether or not they have plans. And that's a question we usually ask on the comment sheet is, do you have plans for renovations, expansion, new build in next 5 years? Right? If they say yes, then a follow-up meeting or interview can be conducted with those individuals.
Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Armstrong.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Lamson. I just want to build on what you said. I think rather than expanding the scope of this project, I think that would be an excellent exercise for our economic development coordinator to do. And that would give her an opening to speak with each of those business owners and do kind of a formal or informal survey of what exactly is there. So I would proceed with the open house. I don't want to, interfere with that. But in terms of research of current state, that's certainly an area I think we could use our own economic development coordinator.
Go ahead, Councillor Braber.
I'm sorry, through your mayor to Deputy Mayor Armstrong. And I believe that the previous Economic Development Advisory Committee did actually go out and speak with, I know the majority of the businesses down there, the pizza shop and the convenience store and Main Street and Ice House. And, I mean, you can name it on two hands, right? All the businesses and potential. So, well, thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Go ahead, Adele.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to provide some comment that we do, when people call in about incentives, we do tell them about the CIP. And there are 3 properties that have inquired over the last year and a half of myself, and they are waiting for the new CIP to come in effect. And only one property owner, Deputy Mayor Armstrong mentioned about people not knowing about the incentive. I know of one property when I identified the CIP and incentives, they didn't want to wait the time it took for the approval. They wanted to get their business up and running. So they did all the renovations without coming forward for approval. How our old CIP worked is that we had an application come forward. We met with the Economic Development Committee. They reviewed the proposal, made some suggestions. Staff did a report to council, and council identified what, if they approved whatever grants they were applying for. So there is a bit of a timeline required before you can even start a project. And you can't start a project and then retroactively ask for some funding, right? So it's all about timing.
True enough. Any other conversation? I just have a couple of comments. I mean, when you look at the red line that you've realigned, which is on the screen, I think there's 58 properties in there or so. And some of them might want to put an auxiliary living space in. So is that something that's going to be able to do the grant? So then you're adding an apartment in a residential unit. I don't know if that's something that we are going to entertain. And then there's also, when you talk about 3 apartments in a building, there's very few buildings in the core that would suit that. And probably our zoning doesn't allow that. So that's the whole issue there, is then you're into a zoning application and many different studies and timelines. And so some of this is a great idea. I just don't know if it can be done under that sort of timeline. I think there's some other ideas to be had there. Because, if you wanted to put 3 apartments on a piece of property, you probably have to rezone. You probably have to, there's a whole bunch of other things that need to happen before you can do that.
To you, Mr. Mayor, that's a good question. And I'm looking at the actual program details right now of the rental, residential, and affordability. So the following types of projects would be considered eligible. So renovation of existing rental residential units in a mixed-use building, 1. Conversion of excess or vacant space in existing commercial and mixed-use buildings into 1 or more net residential units. That's 2. 3, intensification or redevelopment of an existing commercial mixed-use or residential building. So that would be like an apartment building that adds 1 or more net residential units. And 4, infilling of vacant lots, including parking lots, with 2 or more net residential units. A vacant lot. It doesn't say anything in there about a residence adding 1 rental apartment. So we had thought of that. And that's come up in other municipalities. It's okay, we don't want that, but we want all that other stuff.
Okay, because there is some initiatives through the province to do that, right? So.
Yes, the province actually provides development charge exemptions if you're doing that. And if it's affordable, the development charges are reduced by a certain amount depending on number of units.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Councilor Braber.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Just a question, the draft incentive program, point number 4, the rental residential. The last paragraph, last bullet point, where it says applicant must enter an agreement with the municipality to maintain, and it continues on. Is that a requirement, a provincial requirement, or is that something that it's a consideration with the municipality? Because I'll tell you, just as a comment, that if people are aware of that they have to lock themselves in for 20 years, they'll say, no, thanks.
So on the rental side, because keep in mind it's rental and rental affordable. On the rental side, it's a requirement of the plan. On the rental affordable, or any affordable, even if it's market affordable or purchase affordable, that's a requirement. The province requires, and I believe they went to 25 years if I'm not mistaken, but it's at least 20. Yeah. Well, the problem is that, if you give somebody the money and then a year later they say, oh, I don't want to rent it anymore, or I don't want it to be affordable anymore. So the way that agreement works is that the amount that's been provided actually gets registered on title as a lien. So if they bail, at least you get that money back.
Go ahead.
Just follow with that through you. Okay, so and I guess I'm looking at, what's the maximum that a rental affordable could obtain under that section there?
10,000 per units to a maximum of 3 units, so $30,000.
So 30,000.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay. Hey, any other comments or questions? I am seeing none. You must have done a great job, Lucy.
Thank you.
Okay, we can get a motion to receive that, or see Councillor Cadigan for a mover. Receive, and Councillor Franzen for a seconder. Any other conversation? And seeing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you very, very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, we are going to move on now. I find where I am. Go ahead.
Sorry, Marilyn, just a question.
Yes.
Do we need to approve for the plan to proceed and have the public meeting, or does that just happen anyway? I think,
Yeah.
I'm just confused.
Yeah.
Sounds like we need to do more than just receive
Yeah,
it.
yeah, good point.
But I'm
Thank you.
not sure.
I don't know what we do.
So I
mean,
looked to
what
our
would you-
clerk.
What would you prefer?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, typically at this juncture, it is included in the work plan that we proceed. The next step in the work plan is the public information session / meeting. I don't think council needs to direct that to happen because it's part of the approved work plan.
Yes. Okay.
So your next major step is going to be when the draft community improvement plan comes back. But of course, that will be after the formal Planning Act public meeting. So that's going to be your next major review of this.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank
We
you.
will give you guidance then. Go ahead, Councillor.
Sorry, thank you through you, Mayor. Just as an addition, I have one.
Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
So, so the point of next steps, point number one, receive input from council. So you've received our input. And moving on to point two, as a result of the input you've received from council today, do you see any changes? Do you see any revisions that you're going to be making in the draft program as necessary?
I will need direction on the issue on the Kinmount Community Improvement Project area. So yes, we want something there, or no, we don't. I will definitely need direction on that. And not for me, but for staff, it sounds like there's a direction to, after the public meeting, follow up with individual property owners to determine any projects they may have planned, what they want to see, and that sort of thing. So, and obviously I will share in that conversation, either being involved in those discussions or getting it from staff. So that's the two changes I see. I didn't hear anything specifically about changes to the community improvement project area, the goals, or the incentive programs at this point, right? That's what I'm taking away from this.
Okay. Be ready with your questions at the next time we come to the council.
Oh, absolutely. I apologize.
Councillor Franzen, go ahead.
Through you, Mayor, I think it is important that we do something in Kinmount. We have City of the Fourth Lakes that have been doing major improvements in Kinmount. It seems like we aren't pulling our weight. And I believe there's two significant sites in Kinmount that are tourism-based. One would be the Kinmount Fairgrounds, and the other would be the Kinmount Legion. And they both need facelifts.
Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Armstrong.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Lamb. So just a comment. I would have a little different perspective on it. I think we ought to defer consideration of Kinmount at the moment and focus on Buckhorn. Just frankly, just shelve it for now, not to completely delete it. The other thing is we provided grants to both of those organizations. So we are helping them out in a community sense. And I would suggest if Kinmount has a fairly extensive, or City of North Lakes has an extensive community improvement program there, we work with them, let them take the lead. And if they want some support from us, they come to us. But I think we should take the lead on that. And that's what that would mean if we made it a community improvement area. So I respect what you're saying and I agree. We should be participants, but I don't think we should be leading a community improvement project there.
Go ahead, Councillor Franzen.
Through you, Mayor, I was told this when we initially initiated the Buckhorn plan. Be patient and wait, and Kinmount will be next. That was 15 some odd years ago.
Thank you for that comment. It does take time. Like I think you alluded to that 2 or 3 times, that this is not a sprint. This is a marathon. It takes some time to get through things. People have to apply, you have to approve. There's a lot of, I do agree that we should do something with those 2 buildings. Is it this time? I don't think so. I think we get this changed, implemented, see how we get a take on it. Then we can include other areas. Just my opinion. Okay, I think we've, go ahead, Councillor
Sorry,
Braver. One more comment.
One more
I think we've already called for the vote and I think we're.
Yeah, that's through you, Mayor. Thanks very much to Councillor Franzen. I think Deputy Mayor Armstrong's comments as far as the Kinmount and receiving grants. And so the grants would augment any potential future CIP for Kinmount until that is decided on. So.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. We are now going to move on to item 9 of our agenda, which is delegations. And we have Kevin M. Duguay from KMD Planning. Would you like to speak to item 9.1, Kevin? Are you on the line?
I most certainly would, Mayor Lambshead. I'm trusting everybody can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Great. I'd like to, first of all, congratulate your council for contemplating your community improvement plan for Buckhorn. I'm certainly very familiar with those initiatives. And even if a property takes advantage of the program, it's a boon for any of your communities. So congratulations. I'm going to speak very briefly because I know you've been at this meeting for a while, and I actually have another council meeting at 3 o'clock and then my own council meeting at 6. The application for Tib Tranny, which you have considered previously, there was a request at a previous meeting, Your Worship, one of your specific comments at the time, please ensure that this project, the redeveloped or expanded cottage, ends up being no closer to the water than the existing building. I can assure council that was the case then and is certainly the case now. Subsequent to your meeting, we've had a virtual meeting with the planning consultants. We shared with planning consultants and planners the following: a revised site plan. So we've actually changed the deck, the proposed open deck structure, so it's smaller. We have produced a slope stability technical memorandum confirming that the proposed expanded cottage can work in a manner that will not compromise the existing steep slope. We have also produced a shoreline restoration plan, of which there are no issues with respect to same. There is commentary within Mr. Jones' report that some consideration during the planner's virtual meeting of relocating the existing wooden staircase so that it is not a small portion within the unopened road allowance. That is just simply not feasible. To move it would be a substantial disruption to the property. It works fine where it's located. And moreover, we are fully prepared to enter into an encroachment agreement with the municipality. And that's going to be respecting a long-standing location of the stairwell. Lastly, we acknowledge, and I note that it is a practice of your municipality to require such waterfront properties to be subject to a site plan agreement. We acknowledge that would be a matter that has to be addressed, and upon which, when it is readied, then the municipality would be in a position to consider the passage of an implementing bylaw. To the extent then with respect to your encroachment agreement and the site plan agreement, we're prepared to proceed immediately on both fronts and work with Del Arbor and the required staff. So in conclusion, we have met with staff. We have provided the technical information staff sought. Your worship, specifically to your query at the previous council meeting, the proposed expanded cottage is not closer to the shoreline. We are protecting that building line. And I make myself available. I don't know the exact procedures here, but in the event protocol permits, I'm available to respond to questions if there are none. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. I think we can ask questions. Yeah. Does any member of council have any questions of Kevin Duguay? I think you escaped easily today, Kevin. There is no questions. I just have one comment for myself, and that's thank you very much to make sure that that didn't encroach any further into the water yard. Our lake fronts are very important, and it's to maintain some quality water in our lakes. Thank you to you and the applicant for making sure that didn't happen. Okay.
You're welcome, your worship.
I think we need a motion to receive that delegation. See Councillor Braybrick for a mover. And I need a seconder. Councillor Cadigan is a seconder. Is there any other conversation? I'm seeing none. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you very much, Kevin. He's already ran away. Okay, we can move on now to item 10 of our agenda, which is staff reports. And 10.11 is Public Works. Evan Grieger, our Director of Public Works, would you like to speak to this item, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor Lamstead. Through you, Mayor, to members of council. Before you today is just another update regarding the new dedicated mechanics facility on County Road 49. As you can see, they're progressing very well. So recently, beginning of January, they received the steel structure. So that's the main structure of the building. So you can sort of see the skeleton of it, and as well as commenced in the masonry, which would be for the office area in the building. Completion is still planned for fall of this year, so we're looking to 7-8 months. We hopefully will be in that building. We were able to get some different views of the building, so it's been quite exciting, and been very happy with the way the consultant and the construction company is working along with us, and working together, but not too closely together, as you don't want them to be buddy-buddy, but they're definitely working to ensure that the project continues to move along.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Evan. Anyone have any questions about or comments? Go ahead, Councillor Braybrick.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to Evan. Are we on budget and under budget so far?
Thank you, Councillor Braywick. Through you, Mayor. Yes, so far so good. We are still on budget, under budget. We have a contingency that we have not used yet, and we've been able to find some savings within the design. So we actually have a credit working with right now. So it's been quite encouraging that way.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Any other questions? I'm assuming that's a drone picture of the above. That's an interesting picture of the roof going on. That's very interesting. Thank you very much for the pictures. It sure gives you a perspective on the size of that building. Okay, thank you very much, Evan. I don't think there's any more questions. Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to receive.
Thank you. And do I have a seconder? Deputy Mayor Armstrong is a seconder. Any other conversation? I'm seeing none. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. That's an exciting project. Okay, we can move on 10.2 of our agenda, which is recreational facilities. We have none. 10.3 is fire and emergency services. We have none. We can move on to 10.4, which is building and planning, and 10.4.1. Adele Arbor, our planner, would you like to speak to this item? Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. This is a planning report to consider a zoning bylaw amendment for the Tip-Shirani property, municipally known as 73 Fire Route 330. Subsequent to the public meeting and further to a council resolution to defer the zoning bylaw amendment, in efforts that the applicant and municipal staff meet to discuss a proposal that would not further encroach into the water yard, the applicant provided further supplemental information through their planning consultant and agent, Kevin Duguay. Chris Jones' report provides a comparison between the original submission and revised proposal and identifies the only change is the southwest corner of the proposed deck had been removed. Planning staff are recommending, if council is supportive of the revised submission, number one, that the applicant enter into an encroachment agreement with the municipality for the use of the road allowance for access parking and the existing access stairs. Secondly, that the applicant enter into a site plan agreement to implement the submitted studies. And thirdly, upon finalization of the above requirements, council directs staff to prepare the necessary zoning bylaw amendment for council's consideration.
Okay, thank you very much, Adele. Does there anyone have any questions of Adele regarding this application? That was the conversation with Kevin Duguay previously, so. Okay, is there anyone prepared to make a motion? I'm seeing no hand. Councillor Franzen, go ahead.
A motion to approve, including the 3 recommendations
Okay,
from staff.
thank you, Councillor Franzen. I have a motion. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Braybrook for a seconder. Any other conversation? I'm seeing none. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you very much to staff for getting this to us again. Okay, we can move on to item 10.4.2, which is Barbara Waldron, our Director of Building and Planning, CBO. Can you please speak to this item? Are you there, Barbara?
I am sorry, I was having trouble clicking off there. Through you, Mayor Lamset, this is just a standard report that's required by the Building Code Act as a yearly reporting to the public and to council of the indirect costs and the direct costs of the building department. This year has been a little bit challenging. It's not only been challenging for our municipality, but the entire county building departments. Everybody was down in building permits this year. In fact, with the exception of the bigger centers like Toronto, Mississauga, places like that, it was pretty much permits were down across the province in the rural areas. So combination of permits down and costs increasing impacted the reserve quite heavily this year. In general, the major costs that increased this year for us were legal costs. Education is always an ongoing cost that increases as we have to keep learning new building code as it's coming in. We did add an additional staff last year, and computer hardware is always an expensive cost. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Okay, thank you very much, Barbara Waldron. Does anyone have any comments or questions for Barbara? Okay, I'm seeing none, Barbara. You must have read a report in detail. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We can move on to a motion.
Motion to receive.
And there's a second part of that motion there that was on the screen that authorize our CBO to circulate that and post it.
CBO.
Yeah. As recommended.
As recommended.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
Do I have a seconder? I see Councillor Braybrook. Is there a comment there as well?
There is.
Go ahead.
I can squeeze that in.
You
there.
can absolutely, before we call for the vote.
Yes, thank you. Just a quick question, Barb. I don't know if you have the answer, but out of that 159 and change, do we have a breakdown of how much legal we spent in the 159?
I can, through your Mayor Lamson, I can put that together in a further report. That's not something I just want to pull out of thin air today.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. Thanks, Barb. Sorry, I just threw that at you. That was just a question that popped up as a result of one of your comments there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm sure you can get that to us. Okay, I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. Thank you very much, Barbara, for your report. Okay, now we can move on to 10.5 of our agenda, which is finance. Now, 10.5.1 is our budget, and Donna Taggart, our CAO treasurer, was going to speak to this item. Are you still able, Donna?
I am. Thank you, and through you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Perfect, thank you. So before you is the 2024 budget for Trent Lakes and also the tax rates for your approval. Next slide, please. So the assessment summary slide reflects a current value assessment for 2024 of $2,795,742,000. And as a reminder to council and the public, the province has delayed reassessments province-wide and values are still frozen at January 1, 2016. Next slide, please. So this slide breaks down the assessment growth for 2023, which was 1.71%, 49,976,400. And growth is the difference between the January 1, 2023 value and the December 31, 2023 value for new builds and renovations. Next slide, please. So the total 2024 municipal budget is up $3,209,594 for a total of $26,296,678 in 2024. This increase is due to increases in operating costs in some departments, but is mostly due to the construction that's underway of the new dedicated mechanic, recreation, and facilities building. Next slide, please. So the tax levy is budgeted to increase by 4% in 2024 for a total of $10,944,757. And as a reminder, the tax levy is the amount that is paid by ratepayers with the balance of budget funding coming from grants, user fees, borrowing, and reserves. Next slide. The 4% levy increase would result in an increase of $8.53 per 100,000 worth of assessment. Next. As shown on this slide, that results in a residential tax increase of 2.15% for 2024. Next. So this slide shows how much more between 2023 and 2024 the average residential property owner in Trent Lakes would pay, which is about $52.33, using an average of assessments in the single family detached on the water, and seasonal dwelling on water in the residential classes. Next, please. So this slide shows the budget impacts in 2024, which include increased training, certification requirements for emergency services, and increased costs for fire dispatch and radio services agreements. There continue to be purchasing delivery delays and a lack of bidders on projects, increased costs due to inflationary pressures, and increased costs for insurance. There are also budget impacts due to Peterborough Public Health transferring sewage inspections and septic permit issuance to the municipality. There will be some revenue brought in for those services, though, I should mention. Next slide, please. So cost savings in the budget include continued digitization and process efficiencies, joint purchasing initiatives with the county for surface treatment, winter sand, and calcium. And the budget does include new revenue for producer responsibility for recycling at depots. And there are potential cost saving for waste initiatives that result in reduced waste haulage fees. Next. So a significant component of the Trent Lakes budget is the OPP levy annually. And in 2024, it's estimated to be $1,617,828 when factoring in the 2022 reconciliation. There are still some uncertainties surrounding the new countywide Joint Police Service Board and the new Community Policing Act, but there should be some additional information on the impact of this coming in future weeks. Next. This slide breaks down the municipal budget by departments, and it shows that the capital budget, not surprising, is the largest percentage, and the Parks and Recreation is the smallest. So next slide 13 is this shows the tax and non-tax revenue. And you will see that the borrowing required for the new build at the 49 site results in tax revenue at 41.62%. Next slide. Some items included in the 2024 capital budget include the new Public Works and Rec and Facilities building, all the road work, the Lakehurst Hall lower bowl, replacement vehicles and equipment, and the design of a new joint fire and public works building in Buckhorn, resulting in an increase of just over $502,000 in the tax levy. Next. So this slide shows a breakdown of the capital budget by department, with facilities being the largest portion with over 78%, which is not surprising with the build once again. So the next slide shows the tax levy requirement for general government is actually down by about $454,000 in 2024 due to the completion of strategic planning in 2023 and the moving of the CIP budget to building and planning. Some of the work in this that's budgeted in this department includes administrative and council costs, service delivery reviews, economic development, and there will be some rebranding in 2024 and costs associated with the medical centers. Next slide. So the other protective services budget includes costs associated with the OPP, by law enforcement, community improvement planning, land use planning, and now septic permits and inspections. The tax levy is up approximately $198,600 in this department. Next, please. So the Fire and Rescue Services Department, the tax levy is up about $160,000. And this includes costs for this department for training and occurrences, fire hall and equipment costs, vehicles, and emergency planning. So the next one, the public works costs included in the budget are those associated with road maintenance and vehicle and equipment costs, snow plowing, sanding, and salting, and waste management. The tax levy in this department is up approximately $55,000 for this budgeted work. Next slide shows the total costs associated with the waste budget, which are included under Public Works, and these include costs associated with operating the transfer stations, waste haulage, and post-closure monitoring costs, with the increase in the tax levy being just over $12,000 for these services. Slide 21 for the Parks, Recreation, Culture Department has seen an increase in the tax levy requirement in 2024 of approximately $70,000. This budget includes costs to operate the community halls, parks, beaches, vehicles, and the library levy, which is up about $35,000 in 2024. So slides 22 and 23 show that the average ratepayer would pay approximately $1,661.12 in 2024. And that does not include the education or the county levies, as a reminder. And this is just a breakdown, a little further breakdown of everything that is costed in each department. And that is it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Donna Taggart, CAO Treasurer. Does anyone have any questions of Donna regarding the budget? No? Okay. Thank you very much, Donna.
Thank you.
Okay, we would need a motion to receive that, I think. And approve that. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
A motion to receive the report and to approve the 2024 budget as presented. And I'll have a comment after the second.
Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Cadigan for a seconder. And go ahead, Deputy Mayor Armstrong, with your comment.
Yep, thank you, Mayor Lynch. I just want to give a big shout out to the CAO and Treasurer in particular and staff in total. 2.15% increase in the tax rate is one of the lowest in the county, despite the fact that we've been facing a year of inflation, higher costs, supply chain disruptions. increased demand for services, and all of those pressures. However, through a very judicious and proactive use of our reserves, of grants and fees, our management has been able to hold the increase down to 2.15%. So I think they deserve a huge amount of credit for having delivered that budget for our taxpayers and our residents.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that comment, Deputy Mayor Armstrong. I agree wholeheartedly. It's been a long process and we're getting to it fairly early in the season. So I think that's a credit to all our staff. Thank you very kindly for that. Okay, any other comments? I'm going to call for the vote. All in favor? That motion is carried. We have just approved our budget. Wow. Okay, we can move on now to item 10.5.2 of our agenda, which is Donna Taggart, our CEO Treasurer. Could you speak to this item, please, Donna?
Yes, thank you, and through you. So as council will recall, annually when the budget is approved, council must receive a report on Ontario Regulation 28409 in order to fulfill the annual requirement from the province. This report includes costs excluded from the budget for amortization, post-employment benefits, and landfill closure. And I've provided a summary of these costs for you. Budgets are prepared based on cash requirements and do not include PSAB or Public Sector Accounting Board requirements around accrual accounting and non-financial assets and liabilities. So this council is for your information, and I would ask that council receive the report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Donna. Go ahead, Councillor Cadigan.
Motion to receive the report.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? I see Councillor Franzen for a seconder. Any conversation? I'm seeing none. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. Thank you very much, Donna. Okay, we can move on now to item 10.6 of our agenda, which is administration, and Rachel Stark, our economic development and marketing coordinator. Would you like to speak to this item, please?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. This report is regarding the Rural Transit Solutions Fund. Staff brought a report to Council in July 2023 regarding the Rural Transit Solutions Fund, which had a resolution to move forward with the application process for a proposed mobility hub in Buckhorn. Mobility hubs are places in a community that bring together public transit, bike share, car share, and other ways for people to get where they want to go without a private vehicle in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. After Council approval, Trent Lakes brought this idea to Peterborough County staff and other surrounding township staff to discuss potential partnerships. Although there was initial interest in partnership and collaboration, Samhain Township and Curve Lake First Nation are unable to partner for the fund at this time due to other commitments. Should the mobility hub move forward, it is hoped Trent Lakes could continue to collaborate with surrounding townships regarding rural transit in the future. Since September 2023, Peterborough County staff have continued to support Trent Lakes in developing an application for the fund. The Citizens for Alternative Transportation and Trent Lakes Group, or CATTLE, as well as the Buckhorn Community Center have been key supporters in developing this project and have been a real driving force in bringing this idea to life. A number of meetings followed throughout 2023, leading to the draft application of a three-phased mobility hub project as outlined in this report. Not only would the project achieve a traditional hub that provides shared transportation, but also creates an ecosystem of wellness for the community. Overall, the proposed hub would contribute to an increased quality of life, increase in tourism and recreation, economic diversification, growth in tourism, addressing labor shortages, and real estate development. Staff had planned to bring this report to Council for the March 19th, 2024 meeting for consideration, by which time Peterborough County would have a verified budget for the three phases and drawings. However, with a deadline of February 28th now set, CATTLE and staff have received quotes and estimates to the best of our ability to come up with the cost for phase one for the report today. The estimated cost of phase one is between $49,000 to $63,000. This would mean the estimated cost for Trent Lakes to provide 20% of the project cost would be between around $9,600 to $12,600. Staff are recommending that Council direct staff to apply for the Rural Transit Solutions Fund with a proposed project to create a phase one mobility hub at the Buckhorn Community Center. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Rachel. Does anyone have any comments or questions for Rachel? We had Councillor Franzen.
Just a comment. I think through the mayor, I think this is an important initiative, and I would certainly support it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Franzen. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Armstrong.
Thank you, Mayor Lindsay, and through you. The location of these enhancements would be at the BCC, and I was just wondering if we have some sort of a letter of intent or agreement with them around this. It seems they're supporting us, but do we have anything in writing that, you know, will allow us to move forward together?
Yeah.
Through you, Mayor. Currently, there is nothing in writing. However, if the grant was to move forward, there has been talk with the BCC that would happen. As of right now, there's no financial support through the BCC. However, there is in-kind support through using their property.
Okay. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Just to follow up, I guess I would ask our representative to the BCC to be the liaison and to try and ensure that we have a solid commitment on their part.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. Okay, go ahead.
Through your mayor, comment to Deputy Mayor. They did have a meeting this morning and it wasn't brought up at the meeting. So if they don't have another meeting for a month, that all I could get would be able to get is something from the chairperson, but not from the committee.
I think you probably have time. I mean, this is, we're applying for a grant, right? So,
I thought there was,
sorry,
was there not a date of February 28th
for the application.
for the application?
And if you can get a letter, that would be awesome. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Councillor Brayberg.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Thanks, Rachel, for that. Just a question, a couple of questions, actually. Now, with this, the motion directing staff, now in order to submit an application for the funds, do you have to have a project proposal in place? And is that why you're basically asking the phase 1, 2, and 3?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Yes, we created the 3 phases, and the hope through this fund is that we could implement phase 1 specifically, with the hope of looking for other grants in the future for implementing phase 2 and 3. So we have Peterborough County that have helped to create an estimated budget and drawings, and that's the conceptual phase is all that's needed to apply for this fund.
Go ahead, Councillor
Thank you,
Brayberg.
through Mayor. Just to follow up, so phase 1, under the first bullet point, I see a second EV charging station. Where's the first one?
Thank you, and through you. I believe in the drawing where it's yellow highlighted, there's currently an EV charger already there on the BCC property. So the second proposed EV charger would go right beside it on the left side, kind of towards the trees.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry. Another question, Rachel, through you, Mayor. I guess looking at the all the proposed, all the diagrams and whatnot, everything seems to be on the Buckhorn Community Center property. Now, that being a private enterprise, and I realize it's a community hub, I'm just wondering why there wasn't any sort of consideration for, you know, we have municipal properties such as Old Main Park that could be a good location for an EV charger and that sort of thing, as well as what concerns me is nobody else has really put any money up, or they may be in support of it, but there was no letters received and that sort of thing. So it seems that the council is the only one that's being called upon to support this. And I understand that Councillor Franz is going to be seeking a letter from the Buckhorn Community Center, but I'd be interested in how that letter will be fashioned and presented and that sort of thing.
Thank you, and through you. Just a couple comments on why the BCC was chosen. So after council's initial approval last year in July, there was consideration for various properties. The reason the BCC was chosen was, firstly, they did reach out with interest to collaborate, so the relationship was already there. Second, we found no other place would provide the space envisioned for a mobility hub ecosystem, specifically in the main area of Buckhorn. A key part of the hub would include an ability for a bus such as the extension of the link should it happen, which would require a fair amount of space as the bus would need to create a complete loop. Thirdly, the BCC already has connecting trails. So from the BCC building to the overflow lot, there is a trail, as well as from the overflow lot to the Adam and Eve Rocks. So that would be perfect for connecting the BCC to the hamlet of Buckhorn and encourage the use of those trails. That will be enhanced soon. It's also a relatively safe area for transportation, such as walking and biking, as Peterborough County has already put a paved shoulder along that road, and it isn't something like a main intersection. And it also provides an opportunity to utilize that large space of the overflow lot.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Is there any other comments or questions? I'm seeing none. Do I have anyone prepared to make a motion? See, Councillor Franzen, go ahead.
I'll make a motion of support for the application for this grant.
I think there's a few pieces to that motion there, a couple.
Yeah. I don't have that on the bottom of my, the municipality would be responsible for 20% of the total project cost. Direct staff to apply for the Rural Transport Solutions Fund with a proposed project to create Phase 1 Mobility Hub at the Buckhorn Community Center.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Franzen, for that motion. I have a seconder, is Deputy Mayor Armstrong. Any other conversation? I'm seeing none. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you very much, Rachel. That's a nice idea.
Great.
Okay. Now we can move on to item 10.7 of our agenda, which is corporate services, and 10.7.1. Jesse Clark, our clerk, will please speak to this item.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Lambshead. These are the council expenses received for January 2024 for council's review and approval.
Okay. I'm sure you've had a chance to review it. Is anyone prepared to make a motion? See Councillor Cadigan for a
Motion to approve with a comment, if I may.
okay. We'll have the comment after we get a seconder. Do I have a seconder for that motion? See Councillor Franzen for a seconder. And your comment, Councillor Cadigan.
I have additional expenses from a conference that I went to that I will be submitting in the future.
Okay.
In January.
Good. Thank you very much. Okay, any other comments? I'm seeing none. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you very much, Jesse. We can move on to 10.7.2 of our agenda, which is Jesse Clark, our Director of Corporate Services Clerk. Would you like to speak to this item, please?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Lambshead. The municipality's new multi-year accessibility plan was passed in January of 2023. And under the AODA, municipalities are to prepare an annual status report on the progress of measures taken to implement the multi-year accessibility plan and to post this report on the website. So there is an appendix to the report containing the 2023 annual status update. This is just for council's information, and it will be posted on the website after the meeting today.
Okay, thank you, Jesse Clark, for the update. Does there anyone have any questions regarding this item? Seeing none, is anyone prepared to make a motion? Deputy Mayor Armstrong, go ahead.
So I'll make a motion to receive the report on the annual multi-year accessibility plan status.
Okay, do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Cadigan for a seconder. Any other conversations? I'm seeing none. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you very much, Jesse Clark, for all the work on that and on the update. We can move on to item 11 of our agenda, which is correspondence for information. We don't have any today. So we can move on to item 12, which is correspondence for action. Would you like to speak to each one of these individual, or we can do them all at one time, or we can, sure we have comments. Go ahead, Councillor.
Motion to receive all correspondence.
Okay, we're in action items. We
Yep.
probably should look at, maybe we better look at these one at a time. Right? Okay.
Through you, Mayor Lamb, I'm fine if council's in support of receiving all of them. The exception would be 12.2, where we're looking for authorization from council for the mayor and deputy mayor to sign that.
Okay, are we okay with, go ahead, Councillor Braber.
So I'll make a motion to receive all correspondence for action except 12.2.
Okay, do I have a seconder for that motion? The Councillor Cadigan for a seconder. Any other conversation? I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. Okay, now we can go to item 12.2 of our agenda, which is Baker Tilly's audit planning report. Anyone have any questions or comments regarding this, or is prepared to make a motion?
It would just be to receive and to direct the mayor and deputy mayor to sign the audit planning report.
Okay, thank you very much for that idea. Anyone prepared to make that a motion? Or any questions? Go ahead, Councillor Braber.
Thank you. I'll make a motion to receive and also to, it's me authorizing the mayor and deputy mayor to sign the audit planning report.
It will be.
Lowly councillor.
That will be part of your motion. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Oh, Deputy Mayor Armstrong for a seconder?
A second
And
with
you have a comment.
either a comment or a question. Correct me if I'm wrong, I think the signatures of the mayor and the deputy mayor are relevant to the question about is council aware of any frauds, illegal acts, or management override? Is that what council is approving that we attach our signatures to? Or is there another place in the report that you're asking for?
Through you, I may have to defer that to the treasurer on the intent behind the signatures.
Donna Taggart, our CAO treasurer, are you there?
Yes, thank you, and through you. So yes, it would be the mayor and deputy mayor signing on behalf of council. Just, asking the auditors, and full disclosure, the audit was completed last week, but it's asking for the audit to proceed and that you're not aware of any fraud or anything like that.
Yep.
And it is something that you sign annually.
Yes.
Thank you, Don. I just wanted to make that clear for everybody on council, what it was that we were approving
Okay.
and signing on behalf of council.
Okay, we all understand that. Now I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. Okay. We are to bylaws. Did I miss a page? No, perfect. Item 13 of our agenda, which is bylaws, and I see you have a, oh no, these are all on. We don't have so we can go to item 13. We can do these all at once, or we can do them individually, depending on the wishes of council. Go ahead, Councillor Franzen.
Motion to do them all at once.
Do I have
Motion to approve.
a seconder for that motion? Councillor Braybert for a seconder. Is there any other conversation? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. Okay. Now, item 14 is business arising of a previous meeting. Jesse Clark, our Director of Corporate Services Clerk, would you like to speak to this item?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Lamshead. This was on the last agenda, but there's still time to register for delegations for the OGRA conference. Just a reminder that Councillor Braybrook is to attend the conference this year on the municipality's behalf, and we're just looking for direction on which delegations, if any, should be requested.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anyone have any ideas for delegations for Councillor Braybrook? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Armstrong.
Thank you, Mayor Lamshead. Indulge me for a moment. My question is, I've never been to this particular conference. Does it span topics other than public works? It sounds to me like Ontario Good Roads Association is focused on public works. And it sounds like other ministers may be there, but I'm just not clear on what the scope of this conference is and who and why
Okay.
dignitaries will be there.
Okay, I think Kevin Grieger, our Director of Public Works, can speak to that.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor Armstrong, through you, Mayor. So it's a balance of all. So there's transit solutions, there's urban solutions, where you're looking at waste as well. So it's very, Public Works is so broad that it does cover a lot, but it's more of roads, and a lot of it is like transit solutions and stuff like that, but it does cover sort of everything that is on a road. So even like streetlights, stuff like that, stormwater management. They don't get into too much specifics about water because there's an Ontario Water Association owned sort of thing, so they don't get into that stuff, but more to roads, transit, different fundings and stuff like that.
So thank you. So my follow-up would be, is it relevant that we bring these particular delegations to that conference? Firefighting doesn't have a lot to do with roads, nor does library funding, nor does short-term rentals and oath of office. So they're all excellent asks and delegations, but I'm just not sure that this is the place and time for them. But maybe everybody else brings all of their laundry list of wants to this conference, and we should as well. So just a question.
A very, very legitimate question. Go ahead, Councillor Braber.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I guess the question would be, have we done this? Have we done delegations for OGRA in the past at all?
Thank you, Councillor Brady. Through you, Mayor, in my 2.5 years here, I haven't done any delegations here. I'm not sure about the previous directors. From my experience at my previous position, they didn't do delegations at OGRA because it's more roads, and as Deputy Mayor Armstrong referenced, like if you're taking short-term rentals, there's not going to be too much of an appetite there. You'll still have ministers there, and I'm sure they'll listen, but yeah, how much are you actually going to?
Go ahead.
Sorry, follow up through you, Mayor. Is there anything, question to our roads director, is there anything that you would like, being a roads department or a roads conference, is there anything, any burning items that you would want me to present?
Thank you, Councilor Brady. Through you, Mayor. At this point, there's nothing that sort of jumps out to me. Fortunately, we haven't had, like, I know fires had the big change in training requirements and stuff like that. It's really put a lot of pressure on them. Thankfully for us, we haven't received those changes yet or anything like that. So at this point, there's nothing pressing that is putting a whole lot of pressure. I mean, it's just the standard, vehicles, cost, inflation, stuff like that, that's really feeling our pressures. But when it looks at regulations that the province is putting into effect, they're not really impacting us. They're not proposing any changes to the minimum maintenance standards, which would be a big thing that would impact us if they started, increase times or add that. Within the minimum maintenance standards, they speak to bike lanes and stuff, and that's where their focus has, but we don't have any bike lanes, so there's really, for us, there's not a whole lot of impact.
Go ahead, Councillor Braber. One more time.
Through you, Mayor, again. I guess that'd be an opportunity for me to just keep my ear to the ground and see what the other delegations are bringing forward, and see if there's anything that I think would be applicable to Trent Lakes and be beneficial to Trent Lakes, and bearing in mind what we just heard from our economic development, Rachel, about the grants and that sort of thing for the hub and the transit and that sort of thing. So I'll keep my ears open.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Go ahead, Councillor Trent.
Through you, Mayor, I think that we should discuss infrastructure funding. It seems unfortunate and not fair that it has to be covered by our ratepayers, our total infrastructure funding. We haven't received any grants for our facility that we're building on 49. More than likely, we won't be getting any funding for the fire hall and the roads building in Buckhorn. And I think some pressure should be put on the government to provide infrastructure funding for our valuable infrastructure. I know a lot of the mayors within the province have been pressuring the province and the federal government to provide some sort of infrastructure funding.
So that's possibly a good item to include? I mean, we just thought previously on this agenda, we approved speaking with on item 12.6 on action items is to try to return to the combined Roma and OGRA conferences so that it's a little more broad-based conference so that you're not really specifically looking at just good roads, right? So I mean, that's a thing that we should be doing is getting them back together so that it's a little more efficient with our money for Trent Lakes councilors to be going to a conference. So, I mean, I agree. We should be talking to someone about infrastructure funding. I think we're very lacking in that right now, provincial. Any other conversation, questions? I think we need a motion to do that if that's something that council is.
I'll make a motion to bring that forward to the Ontario Good Roads Conference.
Do I have a seconder? I have Councillor Cadigan for a seconder. Any other conversation? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. Okay. Thank you, Jesse, for that. And I just want to make sure that I mention that Amber Novak is advancing our slides today. We have some staff that aren't here, so thank you very much, Amber, for keeping up with us. Okay. We can move on to item 15 of our agenda, which is notices of motion. Does anyone have a notice of motion to present? Seeing none. We can move on to information items. Does anyone have any information items they'd like to share? Seeing none. Go ahead, Councilor.
Sorry, through you, Mayor. Just a quick note, a comment. We had our Police Services Board meeting this morning. And I know on one of our previous council meetings, we had brought up, there was an item brought up of a letter of support for the bail program initiative in the OPP. So the feedback from OPP, currently there's 31 offenders that are on the list that they're monitoring, and approximately 85% of those 31 are violent offenders. So that's it's working out so far.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, Councillor.
Yeah, I'd like to bring forward that a Blizzard Fest was held in Buckhorn on Saturday, and there was a small function in Cavendish to celebrate Canada Day. So I think our municipality was well represented on Family Day.
Thank you very much for that. It was nice seeing some councillors at those events. Very good. Okay, I have one information item, and there's a privately owned piece of property has been purchased through our provincial governments and the Kawartha Land Trust to be put into the conservancy register, so it will be saved for the development for its existence. The Kawartha Land Trust is going to reach out to the communities to see if there's any ideas for what they would like to do there. There's a whole bunch of ideas that they have already, and this is in conjunction with Curve Lake First Nations, ourselves. Selwyn was there. There's a whole bunch of people that put a lot of years of effort into getting this turned into a preserve, and it has been successful finally. And it's a great thing for Trent Lakes. I wanted to thank everybody that was involved with that. It's something we're looking forward to. Okay. And we have any other information? Go ahead, Councilor Braber.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Question to you, Mayor. Do you know where the property is, location?
Yes, I do. It's Fire Route 73. So if you go in Elam Lodge Road and you get to the intersection where you have to go left or right, you go straight ahead in the driveway. And everything on that road on both sides for most of that road is part of that 1,400 acres. There's been some great ideas proposed already. So I don't know if any of them will go to fruition, but there was a farm, an idea. Part of it would be a farm that you could teach people how to farm properly through universities or colleges. And there's a whole bunch of ideas that are coming forward from the Kawartha Land Trust and also from local communities. Chief Knock from Curve Lake First Nations, they're very familiar with that property. They think it's fantastic. It's now saved in perpetuity. So it's a beginning of a good relationship, I hope. So,
thank you.
Okay. And I must be remiss to not say that the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks has put $2.9 million towards that project. That's a substantial amount. And we have the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks up to present the checks. That's great. Okay. Any other information items? I'm seeing none. I would need a motion to go into closed for the Ontario Municipal Act, Section 239(2), to discuss a personal matter about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, municipal employees, labor relations or employee negotiations, municipal employees. And that's it. So I would entertain a motion for that. I see Councillor Braybrick for a mover and Councillor Franzen for a seconder. I will call for the vote. All in favor? The motion is carried. We are in closed session. Okay, we can move on now to item 17.2 of our agenda, which is rising from closed. I would entertain a motion to do so. Deputy Mayor Armstrong for a mover, Councillor Franzen for a seconder. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion is carried. We are closed from closed. We can move on to item 18 of our agenda, which is business arising out of our closed meeting and the adoptions of the minutes. I would entertain a motion for same. See Deputy Mayor Armstrong for a mover. Councillor Cadigan for a seconder. Any conversation about the minutes? Seeing none, we'll call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. We can move on to item 19 of our agenda, which is the adoption of the confirming bylaw. Item 19.1 is the confirming bylaw. You see Councillor Cadigan for a mover. You see Councillor Franzen for a seconder. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion is carried. We have adopted our confirming bylaw. We can move on to item 20 of our agenda, which is adjournment. Would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn? I see Councillor Braybrick for a mover. Councillor Cadigan for a seconder. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion is carried. We are adjourned. Thank you very much, council. Thank you very much, staff.